Today we're going to be talking about editorial calendars, and I know Ryan Brock is going to be bringing a really amazing perspective to this. If you haven't heard him speak before, you're in a good place today. He's fantastic. Ryan, it's so great to see you. Everybody, please welcome Ryan Brock. He's the Chief Solution Officer at DemandJump. It's great to see you. Happy New Year.
Same to you, Stephanie. Thank you. We were talking before. It looks like we're both sort of snowed in still in DC and Indy, but it's a good time for a webinar, I think.
It is a good time for a webinar, for sure. Yes. So, all right. I'll turn it over to you, and I'll see you in a little bit for some Q&A.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, so let's dive in. The name of this presentation is The People versus the Editorial Calendar. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't consult with the people before I decided to name it this. This is kind of my thing. If you've joined us for webinars in the past where I've been presenting here, you know that my general approach, I was talking to Stephanie about this beforehand as well, is to take something about SEO and organic content marketing that I have found through my work and through exploring pillar-based marketing, which is the whole new approach to SEO and organic content that I've spearheaded with my book and what I've been doing at DemandJump. And I like to just take those things that are rules, that are components of our work that we all just assume are just something we have to do, and try to take them down, try to just show as best as I can through some evidence, through some case studies, through whatever material I can get my hands on, why I think it's something that we don't need to care about. And one of the things that I talk about a lot in pillar-based marketing, and if you're not familiar with my whole pillar-based marketing shtick, don't worry, we'll get to that at some point. I'll give you a little bit of a refresher about what makes pillar-based marketing different from traditional SEO content. But one of the things that makes it different is that we don't really care about editorial calendars. We don't publish according to any given time frame, cadence, schedule, anything like that. And that's one of those things that gets the most pushback from people who are thinking about engaging with me and trying this whole pillar-based marketing thing out. And it makes sense because we all spend a lot of time with editorial calendars. It's part and parcel with the whole content marketing thing. So it is my hope by the end of this quick presentation here that I will at least get you questioning, if you need to put as much stock into this concept as you maybe have been to this point. And if you've already thrown it out, maybe this will just be some good support that you need, that you're doing the right thing. But a little bit about me. I am the Chief Solution Officer at DemandJump. I am the co-author of Pillar-Based Marketing, and I just do a lot of working on better data for SEO and better tactics, better best practices for SEO, because it's been my conviction for a long, long time that SEO, as we all typically traditionally do it, is wasteful. It just takes too long to know if what you did worked, and too much of what we do, it doesn't work. And too many of the things that we think are best practices are really just holdovers from older times. And so I'm focused on helping people get ROI out of content really, really quickly, much quicker than they normally do, and to do so in a way where content becomes an asset and not a risk. And so that's the perspective that I'm going to be hitting this from. Someone who used to own an agency for many years and struggled with SEO being something that was just a lot more difficult to plan on and count on over time than other forms and channels of digital marketing, but also somebody who's been like challenging all of those assumptions that I've been making previously and that most of the industry makes about SEO in order to find a better way. So this is not coming from a standpoint to say if you do an editorial calendar with your content, you're wrong or you're doing anything bad, because we all do it. That's not the point. The point here is to just simply scratch the surface and say, have we asked ourselves why? And have we seen evidence to support that there's a reason we do this? So let's dive into it and let's talk about it. Now, people, they love editorial calendars. And I want to just start there because I think it's important that we acknowledge that this is the default position, that using an editorial calendar for your content is the way that you go. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And there's a lot of shapes that can take, right? For me, when I'm talking about an editorial calendar, I'm thinking about people who say we publish our blog content on Tuesdays every week, or Tuesdays and Thursdays, or whatever the case might be. And if you're doing a really good job with your calendar, you might also be including your social media content, your email content, right? Like all the content that you're working on. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm not here to address the idea of using an editorial calendar to keep your team organized and focused. What I am here to talk about is whether or not publishing content consistently and at the same date every week, or whatever it might be, whatever your cadence is that worthwhile? Does it accomplish anything for you in your marketing? Now, I did some research and I looked into it. Anecdotally, I think we all know that people use editorial calendars, like things like monday.com. There's tools in HubSpot. There's tools everywhere for how do I get my content into calendar where I know when I'm going to publish what on what channel and how it's going to go. But HubSpot themselves, I thought they'd be the best people to sort of look for information from about this from. They say that 76.6% of marketers use editorial calendars, believing they really help focus a team. And I think there's other reasons for that as well. But I did my own sort of digging. I put out a poll a few months ago on LinkedIn because I was thinking about this topic, and I was pretty unsurprised by the response I get. Do you use an editorial calendar? If so, what kind? Have split between weekly, and we publish our content every single week on the same day. Some people said that they use a calendar, but it changes per campaign, so they might plan the campaign and they have dates during which that they're going to publish the content. A few people said they do it, but they do something different, and I don't really think that I heard anything that groundbreaking in the responses. And then 44% said no. So the majority of people that I talked to said yes, and it was only 34 votes. So this isn't scientific, but I'm just trying to win over the jury here, right? I'm a prosecutor. I'm not trying to publish a scientific paper. But beyond that, even I owned an agency for over 10 years, and our contracts were based on this idea. The notion that if you're going to buy content from me, one of the core deciders for how much money you're going to spend and what the scope of our services is going to be how much content per week we put out there. So back in the day, we would have talked about it as blog content more than we would have talked about it as SEO content, but that's what we're talking about, right? Your keyword-driven SEO, top-of-the-funnel content. Someone who had a contract with me for once a week, that contract might be half as big as the contract for twice a week. And that was the language we used, that we're gonna help you, and all of this content we produce, whether it's premium content, I put a lull down there because landing page with gated content, I've done enough talking about that I know that nobody's doing it anymore. But there was a time 5-6 years ago when this was a core part of my offering for a complete top to the bottom content marketing service, where we're saying we're going to get you organic traffic and we're going to nurture that traffic and create leads for you in the whole 9 yards. But it was so part and parcel to how I did my work that even the very contracts that I was signing with people were based on what is the output, what is the consistency with which we are publishing. So let's talk about that. What's the purpose of the editorial calendar? Why do we use them? Somebody had asked for an example of one. And I'd be interested, we're going to take a minute here. We're going to do a poll. And if you have a minute and you want to type into the Q&A box, in addition to the poll, how do you use a calendar for your SEO content specifically? I'd like to make this a little bit conversational. But to start things, I want to open up this poll to the group here. And I'm going to start by asking a presumptive question. Why do you use an editorial calendar for your SEO content? Of course, the answer D on the bottom is I don't. So you might not use one, just hit D if you don't. But if you do use an editorial calendar for your SEO content, why do you do it? Do you align your marketing campaigns? Do you keep your team focused and consistent, improve SEO outcomes, or you don't do it at all? And maybe there's a different reason and you could throw it in here. Is this true for everybody? Rhonda says it doesn't look like the right slides are showing. I downloaded the PDF slides and I can see where he must be in his slides, but I'm seeing the CM slides.
I see your survey slide. I see. Yeah, I think it's good. Rhonda, if you want to just refresh your browser, I think it might just be on your end. Yeah. So carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, so we got a little more than half the attendees have selected an answer. We got some really good question or answers coming in. It's mostly an organizational tool, so I know what content is coming out when. I use a calendar that ties together multiple channels to better align them and get better at repurposing. I work for a governmental agency. It's less an editorial calendar than a matrix of who needs to know what and by when. We try to communicate based on agile approach to comms. Little connection hiccup. Okay, so we've got 86. I'm going to let this go for just a moment more, but the answers you're giving are really the answers that I expected. I think a lot of people use these tools to just keep their teams aligned and to make sure that all of their marketing campaigns are aligned. And maybe you would have answered A and B and C to this, but you had to pick one here. And we have Jenna saying we just post Monday. I think that was supposed to be Wednesday and Fridays. So that consistency is important for the internal team. I'm going to go ahead and hit next, which is going to close the poll now, but we got 90% or 68% of you in there. And I'm just interested in seeing what the response is. And it's the same sort of thing that we gathered from the comments that you all have left here. To align marketing campaigns is a strong reason. But a lot of people are using them just to keep their team focused and consistent. And some are using it to improve SEO outcomes, and even more are saying that they don't use editorial calendars. Now, it's really those 5.6% of you, and then hopefully the rest of you, when it comes to an SEO standpoint, that I want to talk to about why you don't really need to worry about this that much. So if we take what you all have talked about, I think it would be easy to sum up by saying the purpose of an editorial calendar, specifically when it comes to SEO, is one of three things. Number one is to keep the team consistent. And I include in that number one the whole concept of we want to make sure that like our SEO content aligns with the content that we're putting out on other channels, the whole 9 yards, right? Where we just want to be consistent. This is for us, not for Google or for the audience. And that's a perfectly valid reason to use something like this. But then if you've been told in the past that it's really important to publish content consistently in order to rank well in Google, which I'm going to say, even if you don't believe that or practice it, we've all been told that many, many times. It's a common refrain in the industry. I would say there's two reasons why publishing the same day every week might be something good and that Google would reward. One of those reasons is to keep the audience coming back, like to get return visitors to your website. Another reason might just be to make Google think that your audience is coming back, right? Like, I think part of the idea of, hey, we publish on Tuesdays, and that's just how we do our SEO content, is the notion that by consistently publishing, it's sort of sending a signal to Google that we're active, we're engaged, and that we have audience that's coming back and caring about what we have to say. But what's the downstream impact of focusing on this? And this is the real key to this conversation. When you let that editorial calendar sort of drive the decisions you're making, and I think even those of us who are not specifically relying on a calendar system to determine when we're publishing our SEO content, but we're using it in general, we find ourselves treating our SEO content differently because we're sort of under the trance of the editorial calendar, right? When that becomes something that we really rely on to do our jobs effectively, and that calendar and hitting those arbitrary dates that we've set for ourselves is the most important thing, it leads to a few different ways of going about SEO content that I think aren't helpful. Number one is just a tendency to find something to write about to keep up with the schedule. Like, it'd be really bad if we missed a week, so we got to make sure we have a new topic to write about. Even if maybe we don't really have anything specific that we want to say, we're just trying to grab for something and say, this is going to be content that we're going to put out because we have a spot in the calendar. Another thing is it's another rule to keep track of. We think that our SEO is going to struggle if we don't do this thing that we've been doing, that if we drop off somehow and we stop publishing every Tuesday, that Google's going to notice and punish us for it. And beyond Google, let's think about your audience. That's point number 3. We developed this misconception that anybody cares if we miss a day. Like, if we miss a week and we don't put our content out, we think that we've failed somehow. And this is something that I like to tell marketers all the time, that in my years of work, and your mileage may vary, but I've never seen a corporate blog have the kind of audience where if they don't hit their Tuesday publishing date, somebody's going to be upset and they're going to miss that content didn't come out. For most of us, that's just not how people are engaging with their content. They're finding it either through Google because they're trying to solve a specific problem or answer a specific question right now in the moment, and your content happened to be the best positioned to answer that question, or they're receiving some sort of outbound direct communication from you. They're seeing your social media post, they're receiving an email from you, something like that that's pushing them along. When that happens, I think matters a lot less than the fact that it does happen. So let's first, since all of this is hinging on the notion of, well, we publish content regularly because we want to keep people coming back. We want consistency, and we want to show Google that we're being consistent. Remember, those are two different issues in my mind, and I might be overcomplicating this a little bit, but they're two different issues. There's the issue of we have to publish consistently because our audience cares about it. And in my mind, caring what the audience cares about is the most important thing. But then what we do in SEO is we sort of take a leap and we say, well, we know that we should publish consistently because Google says you should. Well, why should you do that? Why does Google say you should? I don't know. I guess probably because it makes it look like you're engaging with your audience on a more regular basis, and so it makes you look better. But at the end of the day, the returning traffic is maybe not something that we should be spending too much time worrying about. I wrote this, a few weeks ago, so it's a little bit old right now. It's from 2023, but only about a year-old statistic that when it comes to web traffic, and we'll get to the questions in a moment. I saw something about Facebook, and I want to be clear. I'm talking about your SEO content right here. I'm talking about your website and your owned media content, but we'll read more to your question when it's time for questions at the end. But 75% of visitors to all marketing websites in general, according to HubSpot, that's what we're looking at. So only 25% of the visitors to your average marketing site is someone who's returning, which means that whether you published your last article on Tuesday or 2 days ago or on Wednesday or whatever, doesn't really matter to that person, to the new audience, because they have no idea. They have no frame of reference anyway. Now, if you happen to be in e-commerce, it's a little bit more on the returning side for e-commerce websites. Might be crucial to focus on attracting new visitors. However, the return customer rate might tell you if your existing customers are satisfied with your product or service, which to me is just pretty obvious, basic information here. But the healthy percentage of new versus returning visitors for e-commerce is around 30%. So 30% versus 25%, it's not that big of a difference. At the end of the day, even those sites that require repeat purchases are not seeing that their audiences are coming to them regularly for their content. And so if we know that most of our traffic is not from returning visitors, and Google knows it too, then what evidence do we have that picking a day of the week to publish on is important at all, is going to lend any sort of value to our SEO performance? The typical answer you get when you look for an answer on this is something like this. Now, I'm not going to say who I took this little piece of content from. I can tell you if you ask me directly. It's a reputable, good quality organization that provides SEO and content services. And theirs happened to be the first one that showed up on Google when I was looking for an answer to this specific question. But this is generally what you see out there. It's, why should you use an editorial calendar? It's the accountability, it's the idea generation, it's clear records, it's all those things you all said. But then we also get flowing content. And before we even talk about the idea of getting the whole editorial team on the same page, depending on how big your organization is, we're talking about how, especially in SEO, regular posting is the mecca of impact. This is the statement that gets under my skin. This is the statement that makes me want to talk about this with all of you fine people, because too much in SEO, we read statements like this and we see that these statements have been made for so long that it just becomes this like common knowledge that, well, yeah, if you're going to do SEO content, you better make sure you're publishing regularly, because if you don't, you're going to fail. I've even had recently, I had a customer of mine that I've been working with for years who could not get over the fact that I was telling him not to do that. And even though his results were continuing to increase, he forced us to sort of go back to the editorial calendar way of going about things, because it was just such a long and held belief that, well, everyone knows you've got to do this, and so I'm going to do it. At the end of the day, what would be really great is, rather than making these kinds of statements and saying that they're gospel, if we could just clear this up from Google somehow, which leads me to my next point, the Google leak. If you don't know, last year, Google's algorithm leaked. We had a lot of time and a lot of really smart people, smarter than me, going through it and analyzing, what does Google have to say about all sorts of stuff? So this is a really, really good time to be talking about, well, how regularly should we be publishing content? Like, should we be posting on the same day every week? What does Google think about that? So let's take a look on what Google has to say about editorial calendars. Oops. There's nothing about it in there at all. There is not a single word. And please, I will stand corrected if someone has found this and I've just missed it somehow. But from everything that I've ever seen and every breakdown I've read about this, I've even read much of the leak myself, what I could understand of it anyway. This concept of, does the site publish every Tuesday or on the same day every week or on the same day every 2 weeks or whatever? There's nothing even kind of about that in the current algorithm that was leaked last year. But looking into it is what really led me to this notion that, okay, if we're spending our time thinking about stuff like I should make sure that I publish my content on the same day every week. What are we missing? What in the Google leak are we missing that should be driving our decision making? Because if we're making decisions about publishing content based on this arbitrary decision that, hey, we got a calendar to stick to, what happens, right? Like, it's all the stuff that I talked about before, where we start thinking that we have to, for the sake of good SEO, put out content that isn't going to perform well for us, which means we're wasting resources, right? So are there other signals in the Google leak that could give us a better understanding of like what basis we should be using to decide when we publish content, how much content we publish, how does that look and feel? And to me, the thing that stands out the most, and this is where we're going to shift a little bit, because I think I've made a pretty good case that like SEO and editorial calendars, consistent publishing, it's not really something that Google's thinking about anymore. If it was, we'd have evidence here. But all throughout this leak information, what we do see is stuff like topic borders and topic authority appearing to be real. The topic authority is an example of something very similar to like this editorial calendar concept, or the backlinking idea, or all of these different rules that we have about like including a keyword a certain number of times to hit the right density number. These are things that people say we should do, but there's not a lot of really concrete information about it. Like topical authority is something that people have been talking about for years and years, but nowhere near the same level of attention has been given to this as something like, you know, you got to make sure you're consistent with your publishing. And I even used to talk about that as one of the key metrics of SEO success. And so like, think about it, follow my train of thought a little bit here. I would say to a customer, well, in order to make sure that we're driving rankings, we need to be an authority on a topic. And, you know, your contract says that we are going to publish one blog post a week every Tuesday. And so we now have, if I keep a contract with you for a year, 52 opportunities over the course of a year to prove our expertise on that content. Where what we're seeing in the Google results is basically, and I think I highlighted what's important, every page that you publish is measured against the identity that Google has created for your website, the topical identity. So basically, Google is looking at your website and saying, what is the whole mass of content on this topic that we have determined is part of one topic versus another topic versus a closely related topic over here? Google is spending a ton of time analyzing this part of our website. But rather than thinking about, well, what could we be doing with our publishing to lend itself to this better, we're instead focusing on consistency, which doesn't make any sense anymore. If you take a deeper look at what we've got here, clicks or impressions are aggregated and applied on a topical basis. So you should write more content that can earn more impressions and clicks. So basically, the more content you write about a given topic, the more your clicks and impressions are aggregated across the entirety of your content on that topic, not just any one piece of content. Even if you're only chipping away at the impression and click count, if you provide good experience and are consistent with your topic expansion, you'll start winning, according to the leaked docs. Consistent meaning if you keep adding content, you will win. Yet a lot of us are operating in this way where we'll write content for a whole campaign and get like 5 or 6 blog posts done, and we'll just sit on them because we want to have fuel for our calendar. We want to make sure that that date in our calendar gets filled in a few weeks when we need to have content ready. But we also put a lot less emphasis in an editorial calendar mindset on stuff like updating content, like just going into your content you've already written that is part of your sort of cloud and network of content Google's found on a given topic, and saying this needs to be better. We can improve this, we can expand it, we can update it with new information that's out there. In general, though, the point that I'm trying to make here is that there is a reward if you're doing this well. If you're thinking about your content, not from a calendar perspective, but from I need to make sure I have as much clear content on this topic as available as possible so that Google can start aggregating the total traffic and impressions of all of that content, that's going to be the thing that kickstarts your marketing. And so I think, end of the day, my point is, when we publish week over week just to maintain consistency, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're actually cutting our feet off because we're giving ourselves such a roadblock in terms of building that momentum, getting to a point where there's enough content around a given topic that Google can start understanding your authority on it. By piecemealing out individual pieces, we're making that time to value extend week over week over week over week when it could be happening a lot quicker. So end of the day, just to recap what I'm saying, my conclusions about what I'm reading in this Google leak is how frequently you publish new content simply does not matter. It's not in and of itself a metric by which Google is deciding whether or not you're a good publisher. How consistently you publish content, as in, are you doing it weekly, or are you doing it every other week? Are you missing a week here and there? Are you trying to shoot for weekly, but sometimes you miss? That doesn't matter either. How well you cover your chosen topics matters a lot, and how engaged you remain with those topics over time also matters a lot. So in this world, if I'm trying to give my customers good advice about how to win at SEO, I feel much more motivated to talk about how we are getting to critical mass on a topic as quickly as possible. That's what matters, not consistency, not making sure that we have stuff to put out there week over week. And this is where I'll give a little recap. If you're not familiar with my pillar-based marketing methodology, there's so much content. Go back to the Content Marketing Institute website and just Google my name or search my name with their webinars. I've got tons of them. And you can also get a copy of my book. I think it's available here in the webinar for you to download as well. But long story short, these findings really align with what we've been doing for a long time. Basically, number one, we objectively define a topic. And the thing that's interesting is, just like Google is looking at your website and determining which pieces of content fit into which content topic buckets, we're actually using Google's own data to do the same thing. So we can take a topic, even one you haven't read about or written about, that's what I meant to say, and we can sort of define what would authority look like for this topic. Like, what are the boundaries? What are the guardrails of what kinds of content you could write that would count in Google's mind as being part of one topic versus another? And then we help you build networked pillar content that mirrors what we find in the Google data. So we try to recreate that expected experience of people learning about this topic with the content on your website. And we publish content like boa constrictors eat. For years now, I have been convincing people, stop publishing content weekly or whatever. Just write 15 or 16 pieces of content on a topic, drop it, and move on. Drop it all at the same time. And then over time, optimize that content, maybe add new bits of content every few weeks, every few months if necessary. But the pursuit there is not consistency in scheduling. It is making sure that our coverage is as broad as it can possibly be. Now, I'm at time, so I'm just going to breeze through a couple of really good case studies that show why throwing out the editorial calendar and not worrying about when you're publishing your SEO content really matters, especially when it comes to building topical authority. This is an example of the topic of employee onboarding. So essentially what our software did for a customer is we said, let's look at and define, in this case, it might have been 2,000 terms. And these terms sort of represent the questions and the queries that people are searching as it pertains to one specific topic, how Google makes that distinction that you're an expert in this topic versus another. And then we make our recommendations for how to mimic that networked series of queries and questions using blog posts, using pillar pages, things like that. And we said, write these 16 pieces of content. And then over time, inconsistently, this grew to like 87 pieces of content. But you can see here, just by dropping that initial 16 pieces of content, it wasn't until later in the year that they started publishing more content and we started hitting a plateau of consistency, the ability to spike and to see just in a couple of months, huge SEO rankings. The blue is page 1, and then the multicolor is pages 1 through 10. There's just 1 through 10. There's just a ton of value that we would be missing out on if we took those 16 pieces and we published one here, then one here, then one in May and one in July. The ability to build and take off is just completely lost. And we see that again and again. Here's another one for workflow software, 16 pieces over time, 60 pieces. But the surge could not happen without it. 16 pieces to start, 23 pieces total over time. Again, the surge over the course of just April into May could not have happened if we held onto that content and let it sit for a long time. My favorite example of this, the one that I think is really the most telling, is we look at a company that was doing a new pillar on cybersecurity alert fatigue. They'd never written content in this topic as Google would define it on their website. So they had no topical authority built up on this topic. They simply wrote 5 new pieces of content. They didn't even start with the 16 that we normally recommend. They hadn't published any content in 6 months. And when they published that content here, you can see it's in July. I didn't get the date written down, but it's like July 14th or something like that. Immediately, on this cyber security alert fatigue topic, they start jumping up and they end up with some page one rankings. So within a day, you know, they're driving some actual traffic here, and their potential to increase over time it's huge. Now, if they had done more content, it would have been even bigger. But here's the interesting thing. You go back to the last piece of content the last pillar they had published. They had done the 16 pieces, and you can see over time that led to, you know, a lot of page one rankings for them. And that was over the course of 6 months or more. They just let it sit there, and it gained all of these rankings and did really, really well. And when we published, these arrows are right where we published those 5 new pieces of content that were on a different topic, but related enough where we could find keywords that overlapped between these 2 topics. And so we could link them together, this content across multiple topics. Now you see an immediate spike, and then like it goes higher and it's continuing. There's drops and there's lifts, and this is what happens with the algorithms. It's not always a perfect chart, but you can definitely see the increase in value for this original pillar just based off of those 5 pieces. So the fact that we're not hitting a consistency at all doesn't make us look negative in Google's eyes. What it does is it gives Google a bigger chunk of material to look at in determining what our expertise is and what we should be given rankings on. To me, that's super, super value. So closing statement, I'll be done here. What I want you to take away from this: editorial calendars and weekly publishing are just a few of these legacy SEO tactics that so many still do, but I think can't be justified. And if we're going to improve outcomes, we need to be clear on what our goals or objectives are. For example, are our goals to just publish endlessly and to do so every Tuesday from here until eternity? Or is our goal more like maximizing topical authority, so we don't have to keep pulling and grasping at straws to come up with new keywords to write about for a given topic because we have a slot in the calendar to fill? We can just cover the topic and move on to the next one, making sure to update the existing content we have because we now know from Google Leak that that's really important. Boiling it all down, it's just imperative to understand the full scope of a topic, the entire backdrop of what are all the ways Google thinks people are going to want to learn about a topic in order to make the best content decisions. Because if we're just, again, grasping at straws and picking keywords that we think are related to the topics at hand, we're not building topic authority. We're just publishing individual pages on a weekly basis and hoping that those individual pages are good enough to rank for whatever their focus keywords are. But in the pillar-based marketing world, instead of that, what we can do is we can say, no, this is the totality of what Google thinks is expertise on this topic. And maybe that's 2,000 keywords. We can use our math and really, really good data science to analyze that network of keywords and determine that a certain core set of keywords, maybe it's 200 keywords or so, are the ones that are going to drive the majority of traffic. And that's what we focus our content on. We don't have to go out there searching for endless keyword lists to continue building on a topic. We can confidently say we're going to be seen as authorities because we're going to have a critical mass of content that not only addresses this topic, but addresses it in the way Google expects the audience to want to learn about it. That's what leads to really, really quick and fast topic authority generation in a way that I think most people aren't doing. Most people are talking about topic authority, but defining it, putting numbers behind it, that's something that's a little more interesting. That's why I'm really excited to share with you all that very soon, within weeks, we are going to be launching at DemandJump a beta for a first of its kind topic authority score. I basically looked at all this data and said, actually, I can define on a scale of 0 to 100 exactly where someone's authority is in the eyes of Google and the market for any given topic. And what's great about this is it then leads to a whole suite of optimization functionality that we're bringing out later in this year, where every single recommendation we make to you about how to keep engaged with that content, how to keep updating that content over time, it all comes back to, how is this going to improve my score? How is this action improving this content, adding this headline, creating a new image, writing a whole new piece of content? How is it going to improve my score so that I know that I'm covering this as well as I can, and that if I want to publish any future content on this topic, it's going to rank fast and it's going to stay ranking high so that my content becomes an asset and I don't have to keep just feeding the beast forever, but I can instead just make sure that my appropriately sized beast is well fed and well groomed, and I continue to drive traffic from it into the future. So if you're interested in that, first, I recommend checking out my book if you haven't read it. Again, it's available here for free in the webinar. Uh, it'll give you the bigger background about the pillar-based marketing methodology, why we think the data just suggests so much of what we do in SEO is not necessary to get good results. And then if you're interested in participating in that topic authority score beta, the more people I get, even for a temporary period of time, using this for free so that I can see what a standard website looks like on a topic authority score scale, it'll help me to produce better content and better guidance for people in the future and help them better understand how to improve that topic authority. So make sure to shoot me an email at rbrock@demandjump.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and send me a message there. And with that, I think I will call it and welcome Stephanie back for some questions.